After the initial shock of the earthquake came important practical considerations. Which buildings had been left structurally unsafe? Which had to be demolished? Which could be repaired? Teams of demolishers moved in, changing the landscape in a matter of days. The junction motor inn, its back broken in the quake, was dramatically askew. Overnight, it was reduced to rubble. Today, all that remains is a vacant block. The inner city Newcastle RSL club suffered a roof collapse in the quake. Remarkably, no one was hurt. Hours later, the upstairs rooms would have been packed with patrons. It too was brought down. In a stroke of luck, the club had recently upgraded its insurance policy. In Broadmeadow, the best-known landmark, the former Century Theatre, was deemed beyond repair. The home of the Christian Revival Centre, the solid brick building was cleared to the ground. Just across the railway line, the Broadway Hotel suffered a similar fate. But while the demolitions were dramatic, the quake took its toll on many other buildings in varying degrees. In the city centre alone, this map shows the extent of that damage. The black buildings being demolished, the others suffering some kind of damage. An early count by Newcastle City Council shows 3,300 residential properties reporting damage, and more than 1,200 commercial properties also affected. Royal Newcastle Hospital's North and York wings were evacuated minutes after the quake. This put 200 hospital beds out of use. The York wing has been earmarked for demolition for some time. The North wing will be preserved for its heritage value, but will not be used again to treat patients.
There's no chance of using, for health purposes, the North and York wings again. They are irreparably damaged and $27 million short of current standards of refurbishment.
$6 million in damage was reported at the John Hunter Hospital under construction at Rankin Park. However, this will not affect the commissioning date of January 1991. The argument over preservation of old buildings surfaced as demolition crews started work on the George Hotel in Scott Street and the Carrington Chambers next door. The building owners had been told by engineers that both must come down. Conservation groups did not agree and wanted to save the buildings, but the argument of public safety won the day. Damage extended into the suburbs as well, with brick chimneys often the first casualty. Many homes lost parts of their roofs, some still covered only by tarpaulins put in place by the State Emergency Service. Volunteer crews answered more than 4,000 calls for help in the first weeks after the quake.
We had over a period of time, about 1,500 SES personnel from Newcastle, Maitland, Upper Hunter and Sydney working to assist us. And most of those people worked shifts of about 48 hours and worked really hard. I think it's somewhat difficult for people to realise that there are people in the community who are prepared to work for nothing. And the response from the SES was in fact overwhelming.
A disaster relief centre was set up at Broadmeadow High School to provide food and shelter for those worst affected. Coordinated by the Department of Family and Community Services, this centre became a focal point for social care.
If anyone has their food vouchers, if you wish to go on the bus to Coles to collect your food, the bus is leaving in the next 5 minutes.
In the following 3 weeks, the centre processed 13,800 appeals for help. 300 families were made homeless. Another 1,500 had to find short-term accommodation until their homes were made safe. It's expected that 30,000 homes and businesses across the Newcastle district will be the subject of insurance claims. Repair costs are expected to be higher than those faced by Darwin after Cyclone Tracy. One of the first responses by authorities was to effectively close the city centre and Beaumont Street. Barricades were erected around dangerous buildings and roads were closed. Police and troops manned the blockades, allowing only those with special passes into the city. There was a rush on those passes when police announced they'd be handing them out to anyone who was eligible.
We've got to get into Denison Street to get some files.
Has got some identification?
Yep.
Our office is closed, so they have to get to Data Street.
4 days after, the city fell silent. Images of a deserted Hunter Street on what should have been a busy day were reserved for those with access. Tempers were frayed as people realised how much of their city had been shut down.
One has to explain at every block why you're moving within the city. And it just feels a bit like you're a prisoner.
New Year's Eve was like no other experienced in Newcastle. Inner city residents shared the moment with newfound neighbours. Impromptu street parties were held on the closed roads. But for some, it meant a lonely vigil, bringing in the new year at work.
Yeah, I'm 10, just the location of that quarter back in.
To the corner of Denison and Beaumont Street at Exchange Hotel.